The evening Winona Redleaf stepped onto Ahuli Blackridge's land. The sky looked bruised by an old sorrow, purple melting into rusted gold as the sun slipped behind the plains. Wind moved low through the grass, carrying dust, memory, and the ache of distance, and Winona paused at the fence as if the land itself were deciding whether to let her pass. Her shawl was thin, her shoes worn down by miles of refusal, yet her back was straight, because life had taught her that dignity must be carried even when nothing else remains. When she finally spoke, asking if she could clean his barn for one night's stay, her voice was calm and unafraid, and the question hovered between them like a fragile promise waiting to be broken. Ahuli Blackridge had lived alone so long that silence had become a second skin. He had been fixing a fence post that did not truly need repair, the way lonely men invent work to keep their thoughts from speaking too loudly, and her voice reached him like a stone dropped into still water. He looked up slowly, taking in the young woman standing at his boundary, her eyes steady, her posture composed, as if she were measuring not the land but the man who guarded it. He did not answer right away because words had grown dangerous since grief taught him how easily love can be taken, and he wondered whether speaking now would invite something he no longer knew how to survive. Winona did not move while she waited. She did not plead or explain, did not soften her request with apology, and the restraint of her stillness unsettled him more than desperation ever could. He noticed the dust clinging to her skirt, the faint tremor in her hands she refused to acknowledge, and he sensed, without her saying a word, that the town had already closed its doors to her. When he finally nodded toward the barn, offering neither warmth nor refusal, he felt a tightening in his chest, as if the night itself had leaned closer to witness the choice he had made. She passed him without gratitude that might have sounded like surrender, the barn door creaking open as if uncertain whether to receive another witness to its long silence. Inside, the smell of hay, animals, and old wood wrapped around her, grounding her in something familiar, and she set to work immediately. She swept slowly, deliberately, every movement measured, as if she believed borrowed spaces deserved respect, and Ahuli found himself watching from a distance, unsettled by how her presence softened a place that had known only routine neglect. He told himself it was only temporary, only one night, though something in him already knew that the night would not leave him unchanged. Earlier that day, Winona had stood on the steps of Martha Bell's inn, the wood warm beneath her tired feet as she listened to refusal disguised as concern. The woman's smile had been tight, her eyes flicking briefly toward the street as if trouble might be contagious, and the words had come easily, "No rooms, too much risk, better to move along." The sheriff's gaze had lingered too long, measuring her existence as if it were a problem the town could not afford, and Winona had walked away before shame could settle its roots. She had learned long ago that dignity, once surrendered, is difficult to reclaim. In the barn, she carried those moments without bitterness, because anger is heavy, and she had already carried too much across the plains. She repaired a loose latch Ahuli had ignored for months, patched a torn feed sack, and left the space cleaner than she found it, as if tending broken things might steady her own unsettled heart. When Ahuli returned later with a plate of beans and bread, setting it down quietly and retreating before courtesy could demand conversation, he felt a strange pull in his chest, wondering when kindness had begun to feel like risk. The plate was empty when he checked again, washed and stacked neatly beside the pump, and the latch held firm beneath his hand, a small repair that felt like a question he had not known he was asking. He stood there longer than necessary, listening to the barn settle into its nighttime hush, and wondered why her quiet competence disturbed the careful boundaries he had built around himself. Was loneliness simply the absence of people, he thought, or was it the absence of being seen without judgment? Night deepened, clouds gathering low and heavy, and the first drops of rain struck the tin roof with deliberate insistence. Winona stepped into the doorway to keep water from pooling, her shoulder brushing the frame just as Ahuli moved closer to secure the door, and for a moment the space between them vanished. The closeness carried no urgency, only a charged awareness, as if two lives had paused at the edge of something neither had planned. Outside, thunder rolled distantly, patient and observant, like a reminder that some storms arrive slowly. She spoke then, offering not a confession but fragments of a story shaped by loss. She told him of a family scattered by broken promises, of land remembered more than owned, of the quiet resilience required to keep walking when the world closes its doors. Her words were few, chosen carefully, and they settled between them like stones placed across a river, suggesting passage without guaranteeing safety. Ahuli listened without interruption because he knew too well how easily a story can be silenced when it asks too much of the listener. He shared only enough of his own past to acknowledge the shape of his grief, the wife he had buried beneath a cottonwood tree, and the years he had spent mistaking endurance for healing. The storm outside filled the pauses between them, rain drumming harder as if urging them to speak more, yet both felt the weight of what remained unsaid. In that narrow shelter, time seemed to slow, and each wondered how close one could stand to another's pain without being pulled into its depths. When morning came, it arrived pale and uncertain, the storm having washed the land into sharp clarity. The air smelled clean, almost forgiving, and for a brief moment Ahuli allowed himself to believe the night had passed without consequence. Then horses appeared on the horizon, carrying voices and suspicion, and the town arrived as it always did, without invitation. Someone had seen Winona on the road, someone had talked, and soon questions filled the yard, edged with judgment thinly disguised as concern. Ahuli felt the old instinct to retreat rise within him, the familiar urge to let silence shield him from conflict. He had survived years by remaining unnoticed, by refusing to choose sides, and now the habit pressed against him like a warning. Winona stood near the barn, her expression calm but guarded, as if she had already accepted whatever verdict might be spoken. The space between them felt suddenly fragile, stretched thin by the weight of other people's eyes. Then Ahuli spoke her name aloud, and the sound startled him with its weight. He said she was his guest, that she had earned her place through honest work, and his voice did not waver, because something in him had shifted beyond fear. The words felt like a door opening inside his chest, letting in air he had long denied himself. Winona watched him then, seeing not a savior but a man choosing to stand where he had long hidden, and the moment lingered longer than the confrontation itself. The townspeople left with their doubts intact, but their power diminished, and the ranch felt larger in their absence. The horizon stretched wide and forgiving, and Ahuli realized the land he had guarded so fiercely had been waiting for him to share it. He turned to Winona with a question he had not planned, offering her a place to stay beyond the night, not as charity but as partnership, an invitation shaped by respect rather than obligation. Winona did not answer immediately, because choice deserves reflection, and she had learned the cost of accepting too quickly. She looked at the fields, the repaired barn, the man standing before her without pretense, and felt something unfamiliar stir, not hope but possibility, which is rarer and more dangerous. When she agreed, it was with the understanding that staying would require as much courage as leaving ever had, and the future, once narrow, began to widen. Days turned into weeks and weeks into seasons, marked not by declarations but by gestures. They shared meals eaten slowly, conversations shaped by listening more than speaking, and work done side by side without hurry. Fences were mended, crops tended, and laughter surfaced unexpectedly, startling them both with its ease. Love did not announce itself but arrived quietly, settling into the spaces between routine and trust, visible only to those who knew how to look. There were moments of doubt, of old fears resurfacing, of the world pressing in with reminders of difference and loss, yet each time they chose to remain. Winona learned the rhythms of the land, and Ahuli learned the language of presence, discovering that strength need not be silent to endure. Together they built something that had not existed before, not because it was promised but because it was chosen, again and again. Years later, when the ranch no longer echoed with loneliness, I would think back to that evening and understand how small acts can alter the course of a life. If you have ever stood at a threshold, uncertain whether to open your door or guard it against the world, remember that dignity is forged in moments when fear is met with kindness. The road continues beyond what we can see, and sometimes all it asks is that we answer a simple question before the light fades.